Osio, Lori Roberts, Dewadon. So I said my name is Lori Roberts, or Lori Roberts is my name. So if I wanted to know what your name was, I would say Ghi-ga-u Dewadon. So I would say, what is your name? And then you would say your name, Dewadon. So everybody just
In what dialect is that?
Cherokee.
Cherokee.
So I said Osio, that's hello, and then I said Lori Roberts, Dewadon. So that Lori Roberts is my name. All right. So tonight I'm going to present to you Ghi-ga-u Ward. She was considered the beloved woman, and she was the, I was trying to see how to say this the right way. Ghi-ga-u. Ghi-ga-u means beloved woman in Cherokee. And so I'm kind of going to give you a background of her and why I'm presenting Nancy Ward or Ghi-ga-u. A lot of people have never heard of her, and I bet if I did a poll, most of you have never heard of her. So after tonight, you're going to be educated.
That's good.
So what's interesting about Ghi-ga-u is she is a member. There are people who traced her lineage back to her through the DAR, which is exceptional when we think of the DAR mostly as our patriots and whatnot. She would be considered someone who was a patriot, but just in a different way. Ghi-ga-u was born probably about 1738. She was born, and when she was born, there supposedly was a white wolf that appeared on the hillside near the horizon, and white signifies peace, and she also was born into the Wolf clan. So a lot of people think that was something special because two things kind of coincided at the same time. She was born in a Cherokee town of Chota, which today when we try to find where Chota is, it's no longer there. It's under the Tellico River. In '79, they flooded that part. Although her parents' names are not known, we do know that her mother was part of the Wolf clan, and we know that the Cherokee were matrilineal. And so by that, I mean the matriarch of the family, all of the lineage went through her. The mother is who you traced your family to, and Ghi-ga-u was actually closer to her uncle than she was her own parents, her father. She did have a brother. He was called Longfellow. The English called him that because he could speak so eloquently, and they thought, you know, he has to be some kind of royalty to know such speech. Her uncle, Atakulakula, was later the peace chief of the Cherokee, and he would have a son named Dragging Canoe, and I don't know if you're familiar with Dragging Canoe, but he was not a peace chief. He was the opposite of that. So in the early part of the 1700s, the Cherokee are just coming into contact with the white settlers. Daniel Boone has brought in people through the Gap and whatnot. And so people who know about Ghi-ga-u liken her to Pocahontas, but they call her the Pocahontas of the West because everybody's heard of Pocahontas, but no one had heard of her. So I'm going to share with you a couple of maps. The one on the left was made in the early 1700s, and that is all of Cherokee Nation. So you've got part of Tennessee, Georgia, some of North Carolina, The one on the right is a draft that was drawn of just the Cherokee in Tennessee. And you had the overland, and then you had the lower Cherokee. And if you look, you can see Chota. I have to get close because I can't see it online.
And that's Mississippi River, I guess.
Here's Chota, right here. This is the Tennessee River.
What's that over there?
Mississippi would be over there.
Yeah.
Tennessee River runs up. This one is the Mississippi, right here. Yeah. So, there you go. Good eyes. Better than my eyes. All right. So let's do one more. Let's go on. So when we think about what kind of homes that the Cherokee lived in, a lot of people think, oh, you know, all Native Americans lived in teepees. No, they didn't. The Cherokee actually had two homes. They had one in the summer, and then they had one for the winter. Their summer houses were rectangular with wooden poles as frameworks. They had clay walls, thatched roofs. You can see that one at the top. Their winter homes would be much smaller. They would have a fire pit in the center, and their roofs were more cone-shaped, and that was so that the smoke would rise and go out at the top. They were well fortified with vertically stacked logs that protected them from hostile tribes. And that was a problem. The Cherokee did have people they went to war with. The Creek were one in particular from the southeast. So how many people usually lived in a Cherokee village? Most 30 to 60 homes would be in the village, and you always had a council house, and we're going to look at that here in just a minute. The council house was where their meetings were held, and when they had their sacred fires, they would be inside the council house. You usually had between 400 and 500 people per village. The Cherokee Nation was divided into hundreds of villages, and some of the villages were considered red, which meant they were warring villages. They were the ones who went on the warpath. And then some were considered white or peaceful villages. So while you're doing that, I'll just go on. So we talked a little bit at the beginning about her uncle.
It's not going.
It's not going?
Several times. It doesn't like me.
Oh,
It's my computer, that's why.
earlier it didn't like
It's
us.
my fingertip.
It's my diabetes, my
You don't
fingertips
have
aren't
that.
warm.
Gotcha.
I'll warm my hands up.
All right. So we know a little bit about her uncle, but what about Nenyahi herself? As a young girl, she married a war leader by the name of Kingfisher. Now, Kingfisher was from the Deer clan. There are 7 clans, and we'll talk about them here in a minute. The Deer clan was not particularly prestigious, all right, when you look at who the peace chiefs and the war chiefs were. When she was about 14 or 15, she went to war with her husband. They were fighting at the Battle of Tallawah, and they were fighting the Creek. And the way the story goes, she was chewing the bullets as Kingfisher was putting them in his gun. And the reason she did that, it was supposed to make the bullets more deadly. And while she was chewing a bullet, he was shot and went down. And she picked up his rifle and finished the battle. She also is credited for spurring on the rest of the Cherokee to finish the battle to victory. When she returned to Chota, she was chosen to fill the vacant position of the beloved woman. It's believed then that there were supreme beings, and the Cherokee believed in the little people, and they were out and about, and they believed that the beloved woman had a way of speaking to the spirit world. So, what could she do as beloved woman besides speak to the spirits? She could, if she chose, she was given absolute power. And the question of what are we going to do with prisoners? That was one of her jobs. Another job was just having certain powers to the Ghi-ga-u. But Nancy wasn't shy. Once she was given these powers, she used her powers. She was the head of the Women's Council, which was very influential. Remember I said it was matrilineal. So the women, they ran the show. If a Cherokee woman got tired of her husband, she could set his stuff out and he went packing. And he had to find somewhere else to live. But because there were these 7 clans, she was the one who got to sit in the voting council and give her, she was a member of the council as a beloved woman. Okay, I think you can go ahead.
Ready for another one?
No, maybe not. I think, just hold on. So, she was a widow for a while, and one of the things in the Cherokee village, they traded with the whites. The whites would come through. You had a lot of Scotch-Irish who were living in the mountains at this time, and they were friendly with the Indians, especially the Cherokee. In about 1759, she married an already wed trader, and this is common, unfortunately, and his name was Brian Ward. And at some point before 1760, he left her and he returned back to his white wife and children in South Carolina. But she and this Ward did have a daughter, Betsy. I did forget to tell you, she and Kingfisher had 2 children. KT was a daughter, and 5-Killer Kingfisher was her son. And he will play a little bit of a role in the connection between the whites and the Cherokee. Okay. If it'll let.
There you go.
Okay, so here's a picture of the villages that an artist has rendered of Chota. And you can see the council house in the center. You can see they have the palisades for protection that go around the outside of the village. The cone-shaped homes, you can see that. And then there's another drawing, a painting that shows the Tennessee River. And that's supposed to be Chota. All right, so in June, go ahead, of 1776, and we're getting right at the time of the battles, so I want you to keep that in your mind. The council house there on the picture on the left, you can actually see what the inside of one looked like. And you could easily fit 300 to 400 warriors inside because you're just seeing a small portion of it. But they were seated by clan, and as they went around there's a center pole, I don't know if you can see that, but as they're moving around that pole, the Wolf clan would be first, okay? And I think I can see, yeah, there's the 7 clans, the Cherokee, the Wild Potato, the Blue clan, the Deer clan, the Long Hair clan, the Paint clan, the Wolf clan, and you have the Bird clan. So those are the clans of the Cherokee. So again, when we were talking about, go ahead, her marriage the second time, she was marrying this man, and together they had a daughter named Betsy Ward. Betsy Ward was about a year old when her father left to go back to South Carolina. This is right at the time where Nanyahi needed help. She had this little girl to raise, and he goes back. The story is the Wards, he had a plantation, and he left his wife to run the plantation, and then he was like a merchant, and she supposedly knew that he had a Native American wife, and so she made trips back to South Carolina with her daughter Betsy to be with his family, and supposedly they were on good terms. Betsy's important because Betsy married General Joseph Martin. Joseph Martin was an Indian agent. And I don't know if you've been to the Wilderness Road State Park and some of those places, but there is where they lived. You can see where Joseph Martin and his office was, and it's kind of neat. In 1772, an English diplomat named Robertson visited Nancy's home in Chota, and he described her home as being furnished in barbaric splendor that befitted her high rank. At the time that he visited her, she was 35 years old. And again, people don't live as long, and they pack a lot into their short lives. But she would be an exception. She would go on to live quite a while. All right, so I think you can go ahead. In 1776, she has a cousin by the name of Dragon Canoe. And remember I said she is very close to her uncle. And her uncle is the father of Dragon Canoe. She is a peace chief. He is a war chief. Another Native American by the name of Abraham Raven, several Cherokee war chiefs with 250 warriors with the instigation of the British, because remember the British were trying to get the Cherokee on their side so they could attack the settlers. They had planned to attack the western settlements, and the Ghi-ga-u warned that settlers of the impending attacks let them know that on July 20th, Abraham would be marching toward Watauga in East Tennessee. And you can go ahead. Wait a minute. No, don't go yet. Okay, so when the Cherokee would go into a white village, they would want to take captives and prisoners. And it was up to the beloved woman whether or not they lived or died. And so Nanyahi warned the settlers, and several of them were able to escape. But one of the women, and her name was Mrs. Bean, we're going to talk about her here in just a minute, and her first name was Lydia. She was taken captive. She is the mother of the first white child who's born in Tennessee. And at some point I can remember seeing there was a marker alongside the road before I knew who she was. And I thought, oh, that's interesting that they made mention of her. But now I don't know. So on July 20th, 1776, Abraham, marching to attack the Watauga, captured Mrs. Bean. And it was common for the Cherokee to torture their prisoners. And unfortunately, most people didn't live to tell about being prisoner. And Mrs. Bean was condemned to die. And they decided that she would be killed by burning her at the stake. So they took her to the mouth, on this mound of the center of Tuskegee, just above the mouth of the Tellico, or Little Tennessee River. She was bound, and they had pieces of wood stacked up that they were getting ready to torch, and Nancy Ward spared her life. She asked her, before they lit the match, she said, "Can you make butter?" And of course, Lydia Bean said yes, and she told the warriors to spare her life on the condition that Lydia Bean would live with her, teach her how to make butter, how to weave cloth, and teach all of the women in the village the same. And she agreed to, and she stayed with Nanyahi. She was her captive. She had to stay in her home But she also taught her how to make clothes. And the dress that I have on, now this would have been a little bit later than this, but this is called a Cherokee tear dress, or it could be called a tear dress, because when the Cherokee went on the Trail of Tears, and this would have been about 1820s. But if you notice, it looks a lot like a man's shirt. You know, it's not womany at all. But this is kind of what they would have worn. And the reason they called it a tear dress is because they didn't have scissors. When they got to Oklahoma, they just tore their material and just kind of, you know, bits and pieces. This one doesn't have as many colors because it's kind of vibrant. But the tear part comes in from the Trail of Tears. So that's, but anyway, she did teach her how to spin, how to weave. And she spent her time, and once she did what she promised, they released her. Now, she sent her brother Longfellow and her son Five Killer, and took Mrs. Bean back and gave her back to her husband. If you go to the next one, I think there is a cabin picture that we can see. Yeah.
Okay.
So this cabin is, so when the Revolutionary War broke out, the Cherokee signed another treaty to be in with the British. The Cherokee prepared to attack the frontier settlements in Virginia, Carolinas, and Georgia. So they definitely did not want to see encroachment into their territory. The responsibility assigned to 700 warriors from Chota was to strike the settlers who lived in the Watauga area. As much of the Cherokee's sake as for the sake of the settlers, again, Nancy Ward helped Isaac Thomas, William Falling, and another white man escape from Chota to go and warn the Wataugans in time to get their fortifications ready. This act established Nancy's reputation as a friend of the settlers. Now, if you notice, I've kind of gone back and forth between Nancy and Nanyahi. When she married Brant Ward, she was baptized and was given a Christian name. So that's why most people know her as Nancy Ward. All right. So in October, Colonel William Christian led nearly 2,000 troops in a devastating raid, and out of respect for Nancy Ward, he spared Chota, while most of the other Cherokee towns were ravaged. And that's kind of going to be the fate of Chota down the road. I mean, it's kind of like when the Cherokee tried to assimilate, thinking they would be spared from the Trail of Tears. They weren't. So what happens with Nancy during the Revolution? And this is kind of interesting. When the war broke out, the Cherokee sided with the British, and they prepared, to attack. But Nancy Ward, she still is the peace chief, and she's still wanting the British and the English, to quit fighting and quit putting them in the middle, because the Cherokee always felt like they were in the middle. So you go ahead.
Did the Cherokee consider her a traitor?
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
Did the Cherokee consider her a traitor?
No, what the Cherokee people, because she was the leader of their people, she told them it's best if we get along and not take part. So when the Cherokee come back and Chota has been spared and the Watauga settlement was warned, some of the Cherokee, like Dragging Canoe and some of those, were like, you can't burn the candle on both ends. You've got to pick somewhere and stay with it. In 1780, at a time when most of the Watauga men were away from home and engaged in a Kings Mountain campaign, the frontier guards came on short rations. And these are the people who are fighting, the militia, who are nearby. And again, remember, Lydia Bean taught her not only how to spin, make butter, sew, she also told her, you should be eating beef because sometimes you may not have enough deer to feed the tribe. So she went out, Nancy Ward, and purchased cattle. And she also purchased a few slaves while she was in the South. And she also brought those back. So the Cherokee did have slaves, and she did help the American patriots. She sent out a supply of beef, sent them some cattle, and again, I think that was to keep the peace. As long as she helped the white settlers, she figured they would in turn help the Cherokee. The Cherokee prepared to attack again the settlements in the Watauga. Nancy Ward again warns the whites, and when the soldiers returned and learned of the threat, they were enraged, and they set out to teach the Cherokee a lesson they would never forget. Despite her pleas for mercy and friendship, Chota was destroyed, along with several other towns, and for a short time, she and her family were placed in protective custody because she was a wanted woman. When they were finally released, they returned to help rebuild the town. And on July 20th, 1781, Nancy was the featured speaker for the Cherokees when when the people reluctantly accepted a peace treaty with the Wataugans. Again, these peace treaties, the Cherokee would sign, and then the whites would not live up to their end of the bargain. And so another reason why Nancy Ward thought they would be better off learning more of the white ways. They would also learn the language, they would be able to freely speak the language, and they would know if they were being tricked. And the Cherokee, because of Sequoia, had their own language later on, and that was one reason to communicate, but also to protect themselves. When the Treaty of Hopewell was made in South Carolina in 1785, she offered another dramatic plea for continued peace between the Indians and the whites. So every time there is an oops, Nancy Ward comes to the rescue, or so we hope, because obviously she is, she's one of these women that you just don't hear about. You don't hear about a Native American woman wanting to save the whites. It's just very, very rare. Go ahead. So what happens during her later years? Nancy Ward, she kept that name, by the way, operated an inn at a place called Woman Killer Ford of the Okawi River. And she became quite wealthy. She took in children, orphan children of every race. She had white children. She had, of course, Native American children staying at her inn. But she was well respected. If a child was orphaned, they usually brought them to Woman Killer Ford for her to take. She had slaves, she had livestock, and she had money. She tended to the children and was held in high regard. Travelers called her Granny Ward because of her age and that she was the widow of Brian Ward. And again, that gave her a little prestige with the white settlers. When she grew too old to meet with the council and other chiefs, she would send a servant with her walking stick. That was her badge of authority. And it was to assure that her spirit was in that war council, even though she wasn't, her war stick was. And so on May 6, 1817, the renunciation of the delegated rights and in favor of the first constitutional enactment of the Cherokees was made. And she does speak because she had that beloved woman. That title was given to her. she was able to speak her piece with the other warriors and the other chiefs. And she also wanted the Cherokee to assimilate. She was one of those who wanted the Cherokee to live in their houses, adopt more white ways, and try to adopt the white culture, basically to save her tribe, because Native Americans knew what was going on in other places. And the Indian Removal Act happened, it was starting to happen earlier, and so they knew about this. She did give a speech in 1817, and I'm just going to read, I think you may have this, but I don't know.
Next one says petition to save Cherokee lands.
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
Is that what you want?
Yeah, that's,
How old was she when she died? You went
she
to
was in her 60s.
Oh, not even, you know.
Yeah, because she was born in 1738 and she died in 1822.
Well, she was older then.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's
she was in her
almost
70s, almost 80.
my,
I think. Okay, so this actually what I'm going to read to you was found in Andrew Jackson's papers at the Hermitage. Now, if you know anything about Andrew Jackson, what did Andrew Jackson do? He was the president that signed the Indian Removal Act into law.
It's terrible.
I'm sorry?
It's terrible.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't he fight them in Florida too? Jackson?
Did he
Was
what?
Jackson the one that went to Florida?
In the Battle of
Indians?
1814.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a war hero, but he was okay with the Cherokee staying on their land. He was probably going to let them stay on their land, but they found gold under their land, and Georgia wanted it. And so that's a whole history lesson in itself, because he kind of got in some trouble because he made it this way, and then when it was with the Indians, he changed his mind. But that's what happened. So here's these papers that were found, which I think is ironic, in Jackson's study. And it was Nancy Ward's own words. The Cherokee ladies, now being present at the meeting of the chiefs and the warriors in council, have thought it their duty as mothers to address their beloved chiefs and warriors now assembled. Our beloved children and headmen of the Cherokee Nation will address you, warriors, now assembled. Our beloved children and headmen of the Cherokee Nation, we address you, warriors in council. We have raised all of you on the land that we now have, which God gave us to inhabit and raise provisions. We know that our country has once been extensive, but by repeated sales has become circumscribed to a small tract, and never have thought it our duty to interfere in the disposition of it until now. If a father or mother was to sell all their lands, which they had to depend on, which their children had to raise their living on, which would be indeed bad, and to be removed to another country, we do not wish to go to an unknown country, which we have understood would be like destroying your mothers. Your mothers and your sisters ask and beg of you not to part with any more of our lands. We say ours, you are descendants, and take pity on our request. But keep it for our growing children, for it was the goodwill of our Creator to place us here. And you know our Father, the great President, will not allow his white children to take our country away, only to keep your hands off of paper talks, for it is our own country. For if it was not, they would not ask you to put your hands to paper for it, and be impossible to remove us all. For as soon as one child is raised, we have others in our arms, for such is the situation, and will consider our circumstances. Therefore, children, don't part with any more of our lands, but continue on it and enlarge your farms and cultivate and raise corn and cotton, and we, your mothers and sisters, will make clothing for you. And our Father, the President, has recommended to us all, we don't charge anybody for selling any lands. but we have heard such intentions of our children. Your talks become true at least, and it was our desire to forewarn you all not to part with our lands. And then this was at the end. Nancy Ward to her children, warriors, take pity and listen to the talks of your sisters. Although I am very old, yet cannot but pity the situation in which you will hear of their minds. I have a great many grandchildren, which I wish them to do well on our land. I guess I can figure out why Andrew Jackson had this in his records, because she referred to him as the great father, the great president. It was kind of a little, well, she must have thought I was great. Even though we ended up kicking him off her name. So the Cherokee beloved woman, the wild rose of the Cherokee, the Pocahontas of the West, war woman, prophetess, and Granny Ward are just a few of the names and titles given to Nancy Ward, the most powerful and influential woman in the Cherokee Nation. She ruled over the powerful Council of Women and had a voting seat at the Council of Chiefs. And during her lifetime, the Cherokee moved from matriarchal, clan-type government to a republic much like our own. Nancy was born in Chota and was loved and respected by the settlers as well as the Cherokee. She had absolute power over prisoners, and on numerous occasions she saved the lives of many whites. On at least 2 occasions during the Revolutionary period, she sent warnings to John Sevier at the Watauga settlements of planned Indian attacks, giving them time to prepare a defense or a counteroffensive. She participated in the treaty on July of 1781 and the Treaty of Hopewell in 1785. She alluded to her never-ending desire to seek peace for her people and to hold on to as much of their land as possible. After the Hiwassee Purchase in 1819, she left Chota and she moved to the Okie River near Benton, Tennessee. She operated an inn at Woman Killer Ford on the Federal Road until she died in her sleep in 1822. She is buried on a hill nearby. The story is told her daughter Betsy was in the room, and they said when she died, a light raised out of her chest went around the room and shot out through the ceiling. So her light had left. In 1923, a monument was placed on her grave by a Chattanooga chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution. And again, there's some pictures of her gravesite. You can see her son, her daughter are buried there along with her brother, I believe, Longfellow. And that's a little plaque to Nancy Ward. And a lot of people make that journey. When we went, there was actually some flowers placed on, they kind of pitched them over on her grave. So it's kind of a neat place to visit, very peaceful. Okay.
What county would that be in Tennessee? Do you know?
Benton, it's not.
It's in East Tennessee, I assume.
It wouldn't be, it's not, it might be Green, near Green. I can't remember. I know Washington is where Jonesboro is. It's not real far from there, so that's a good question. But I'm sorry, I'm not sure.
Get it? Polk County.
Polk County? Oh, that's where President Polk's from, isn't he?
He was elected president.
Mm-hmm. All right.
It's in Columbia.
Yeah, that's where the Athenaeum is. It's right across from those.
There's just house lots.
Yep. Okay, we'll let you go again. All right, so I'll leave you with this. The same house shelters us, and the same sky covers us. And that was from Nenyahi, the beloved woman of the Cherokee. Good words, because she really did believe that. She believed that, once...
That's true, that's good.
Yeah, everybody's under the same roof, so. And I think that's the last time. You go one more, and I think that's it. Yeah, thank you for coming tonight, and have a safe trip home. If you have any questions, I would love to answer.
I have a question.
Okay,
So I noticed that the year that her husband died and she went to war with him is also the same year her son was born. Do we know? Okay, so you know my question.
so her son was a baby at the time of this battle. I don't know where he was. I know she had already given birth to him.
Presumably he didn't come along as a papoose on her back or anything. I mean,
No,
to battle,
not to my
but
knowledge.
kinda crazy.
Not to
but-
my knowledge. And he wasn't a wood skull, so we know it was Kingfisher. So,
So the Lydia Bean, there's a Bean Station, Tennessee.
that is them.
Okay.
That was, when you go to Bean Station, that cabin was in that part of that farm. And I know that the Beans had contact with Daniel Boone, and of course Bryant Ward had, contact with the settlers coming through the gap at one time. So they're all kind of interconnected. And of course, the Watauga settlement is where they came up through.
Does she have descendants through all three of those kids then?
No, I don't think her son, Five Killer, I don't think there's any more descendants left through him. Betsy, yes. And KT, yes. I know for sure those two. Because I kind of, when I was looking on my DAR stuff, I kind of got in there and did some messing around, and there's people who still have.
Are they still in Tennessee?
They're all over. Her family has gone all over. The descendants have. But yeah.
So none of her family, did they have to go on the Trail of Tears?
So Betsy, no, she had left and was living somewhere else because her husband had also died. He was, I believe he was murdered, I think.
Is this the one with the general for the husband?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he was murdered, if I think right back. So she was with her mother. It was 1822. The Trail of Tears was until 1832. So she had long since left the area.
For where?
I'm not sure where she went. I'd say North Carolina because that seems to be where a lot of the Cherokee had, if they were able to get away, they went into the mountains, the Smokies, they went further away into the Watauga, south, down into Georgia, further to hide. And then when they came back, I mean, we know that they came back. But most of them that went in Oklahoma. Another neat thing about that, when they were on the Trail of Tears, the women took a hot coal and they put it in a tinder box or whatever you call it, and they carried that to Oklahoma. To my knowledge, they've never let it go out. It has been burning ever since.
Wow.
So, yeah.
How did you get interested in her?
Let me answer hers.
Oh, I
And,
think
no,
so.
that's okay. And then I'll answer you.
On your first slide, that when we walked in, it had her name and another name on it, that I'm
Yes.
not going to pretend I could do that.
That's okay.
Who
So
was that person?
that was Nancy Ward. That was Ninyahi. That was a drawing of her, the very first slide. And it should have said, see if I can go back, the Ghi-ga-u.
That one.
Yeah, Ghi-ga-u, beloved woman.
Oh,
Beloved.
is that what that means?
Yes.
Okay.
And so her name, Ninyahi, means one who walks about or one who goes about. That was her in Cherokee. That's what Ninyahi means, one who goes about. So, yeah, and what was your question?
I just wondered how you got interested in it. Like, none of us, not many of us have heard of her.
Okay.
We have now.
So I teach U.S. history, and I'm also an author. So when I was writing a book, it was about the Cherokee, and it kind of coincided with Daniel Boone's daughters being daughter being kidnapped, and my story kind of went a different direction. There was another girl that got kidnapped and went with the Cherokee. And so I thought, well, I'd like somebody in that story who is a strong woman figure. And I had several, and I found out about her. And boy, the rabbit holes that I went down. And of course, my husband, I said, okay, get the camper ready. We have a trip we're taking. And so we did. We did the research on the book, but then I wanted to know more about her. So that's how. And I've always been interested in the Cherokee. And I don't know why. I guess because of the Smokies and everything. That they're very interesting to me.
Did they not have their own college?
They had their own newspaper. The Cherokee had their own constitution. They had.
I understood they had their own college.
Oh, I'm sure they did. But
That's one of the reasons why Daniel Boone went west, because the congressman kept a lot in their ground and selling it, making them rich.
oh, see, I
And
know.
he served in Congress, and he got paid up with it, and went to west.
So now, who are you talking? Daniel Boone did? He was in Congress. I guess I forgot.
He served several different terms.
Okay, I was. You know who I'm thinking of? I'm thinking of Davy Crockett.
Right.
In my
It says-
head.
It says here that she is credited with the introduction of dairy products to the Cherokee Nation.
Yeah, because they had
Butter.
cows.
No, I wonder, if they made butter, they had to have cows.
Yeah.
Remember the cows came in just there?
Well, when they would raid, they would bring back whatever they wanted. Yeah. So they probably. I mean, in my mind, I'd say they probably went back and got them from her farm, and you know. It wouldn't surprise me if they did, because a lot of these people were so terrified, they left after there was a massacre or whatever, or they burn them out. But that cabin was still there, and that's why that drawing was there. I was trying to think. They used the stones in the chimney for something, and I cannot remember, from the beams. You know, when it finally collapsed, they used those stones, and they're still used somewhere. I've been up a long time.
I didn't call it a night.
No, I mean, I can't remember. It's just, I've done other things today, and I can't remember that. But, so, yeah.
Well, it's fascinating.
Step out so we can get a picture of
Oh,
your
okay.
dress.
Let me take these off, because they are. Okay.
You might explain about the dress again now that, for the
People
camera.
can see it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this is called a Cherokee tear dress, and this is a little bit later than the time period, so we're talking about maybe 8 to 10 years. And when the Cherokee women were on the Trail of Tears and they got to Oklahoma, a lot of them were wearing these kind of things, or they were still wearing a skirt and like a shift, some kind of, mixed match.
In fabric or in leather?
Fabric. Because they had learned how to weave their own, and they had stores. I mean, they were quite up and coming, but some of them still wore the buckskin. But they had these dresses, and when they got out to Oklahoma, they didn't have scissors. They had knives or whatever, and they would usually tear the material in a triangle or a rectangle because it was easy to sew. And like I said, this one is very calm compared to some of the ones that I've seen. They have just like really vibrant colors, but I kind of want to tone it down a little bit, more earthy tones, because I think this is probably what they wore more of, more earthy tones,
Better camouflage.
Yeah,
And plus the skins in Oklahoma would have been very hot.
that and where they really didn't have a whole lot.
To kill,
To
to get
kill.
skins.
Yeah, they didn't have a lot to kill.
Got a pretty comb in your hair too.
Oh, my comb?
Yeah, I could-
Nice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank,
That's all I
thanks so
Well,
much,
words
Lauren.
and